Hello, welcome to another My Life in Objects video. So this is related to a video I've done earlier this week, or the week that this video was shot, where I was talking about the different programming languages that I'd been exposed to over the years. And the very first programming language I learned was BASIC. And I mentioned in the video about programming in BASIC and having to use a mainframe, and then the first time I really got my hands on a machine and physically type something in would have been Commodore BASIC. And so that made me think about what was the first programming book I bought. And it was this one. It's on camera at the moment. And I have books older than this simply because, for example, when I became interested in Lisp a number of years later, I tracked down a reprint of an early Lisp manual, those sort of books. But this is the book that I bought in 1988 or thereabouts, when I was working in a lab, in a quality control lab, and I was creating programs to do various quality control analyses and stuff related to goods inwards and antimicrobial. I'm trying to think of the right term for it now, but it was to do with calculating the potency of a new batch of antimicrobic powder against the previous batch, those sort of things, along with document generation. Now, if you've already watched the video where I talk about my exposure to different programming languages, you'll know that actually I started programming BASIC back in the 70s, back in, I believe, 78, 79. So why is there such a big gap between me learning programming and actually buying a book on BASIC? And the reason is, when I learnt BASIC originally, that was done in a class at school, and I took extensive notes, and in amongst all of my notes I had all of my coding sheets where I'd written out by hand the programs I was going to write. And I can remember spending a lot. I was so into it. One summer, when I used to go over and stay at my grandparents' flat during the summer holidays, spending quite a big time of that sitting at their big kitchen table just coding with paper and pencil, with no computer, just writing out code. I was so into it, so that I could then run the code when I got back at the start of the following year so that would have been for when we had the Commodore PETs at school. Now, unfortunately, I lent all of my notes and all of my computer code to a friend in around about 81, 82, after I'd finished school and started work, because they had just started a computer programming course, and I never got the notes back. So from that point onwards, I actually relied on my memory. Every time I needed to code, it was just all in my head in terms of the syntax of the language. I don't know if I could do that nowadays with a lot of languages, but yeah, that's what I did. But then around about, so this book, this version of the book is 87. So yeah, around 87, 88, I bought this because I had we'd, just trying to think the exact context of this, but I seem to remember just trying to remember the point at which DOS went from running GW Basic to running Q Basic. And also I was writing much more complicated programs, and I couldn't just rely on my memory of syntax from the late 70s into the early 80s for Basic. So I actually bought this book, and it's pretty cool actually. It was a great book to just learn. And of course at this point at work I had access to a machine. I could just sit in front of it and work my way through the examples, trying stuff out as well. So you can see it's divided into different chapters here. We've got introduction, input, output, arithmetic operations, program development, conditional and unconditional branching, functions, colour and graphics, arrays, subroutines, sound, range of applications, using a printer and disk unit, data files, file processing and reporting example. This was really useful because when I was using Commodore PET at school, you saved to tape, and obviously some of the programs I was using, I was having to save to text files and various other things, so creating data files. So that was another reason for getting this, so I had a bit of a better understanding as well. And now actually, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, so this was the one that I bought when I was still using GW Basic. At the point Q Basic appeared, which would have been, was it DOS 5? I think that's when it appeared. I bought this, which was really just fundamentally a guide to all the different statements and functions in QBasic. There was a little bit at the front that explained about programming, but it was pretty thin on the ground, pretty slim pickings there. So this was more for my benefit in terms of, were there any extra statements that I needed to know about functionality in QBasic that wasn't in GW Basic. Now, of course, this one here really is just, I don't know if you can use the term standard basic, I suppose. I'm trying to remember here whether it does actually have a specific... I haven't looked at this book in years. It's just on my bookshelf. I don't even know if it mentions the particular flavour of basic, because as I mentioned in my video earlier in the week, there were different flavours. There was Apple Basic, there was Commodore Basic, and but I mean, obviously there were a lot of it was very similar. There's just a few differences here and there that you had to get used to. Well, there's all these. So each section in here has a fairly major, at least one big programming example. In so many, there's lots. And of course, some of the programs I was producing required me to sort of plot graphs and things like that, just to sort of illustrate things like line of best fit and a few other things as well. But anyway, I thought people might be interested by what's the oldest programming book I have in terms of when the one I bought when I needed to buy it. As I've said, I've got some older ones, a lot older, and at some point I will probably go through those. But yeah, it's interesting to dig these out. You can see, I don't know if this is the one, I think it might be my DOS book, but yeah, there we go. Pages are starting to fall out there. So it needs to go back on the shelf. Looks like there's a few coffee stains on here as well. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.